Present day. Present time.
It only took one sword to put seven holer. It only took one sword to put seven holer. It only took one sword to put seven holer.
People are scared of a lot of things, but words aren't one of them. It would be stupid if they did, but one of the benefits of fiction is the ability to tackle the deepest human emotions and understand the soul better. Media is able to project ideas that let people view a slice of the real world, letting them to understand it better. But also media serves the purpose of entertainment, and one of the most popular genres of entertainment is horror. Horror media inflicts a fear to the viewer by creating a scary environment and keeping the viewer scared with a monster of many kinds, usually serving as the antagonist. Usually monsters are the manifestations of primal fears of larger predators, whether that would be physically like Jason or a vampire, or it being spiritual like a ghost or a curse. It is always something scary that causes dread to the viewer. These movies build up the reveal of the antagonist, and with the use of jump scares get a quick thrill out of the viewer. In my personal opinion, jump scares are a very cheap way to scare the viewer, since they get startled for a moment but get used to it, and the mystery of the antagonist is usually broken with their inclusion. Media that use horror to its full potential uses it to create an atmosphere to put the viewer on edge and put it inside their head that the threat could be around every corner and keep the dread for a longer period of time. The greatest horror to the human mind is the one they cannot understand or comprehend. That fear of the unknown is built up as a survival instinct. That's why stories about ghosts or otherworldly beings are so popular. They are beings that we don't fully understand, so we fear of their abilities. But what happens when a human doesn't act like a human, or doesn't seem to resemble 100% a human? That's the uncanny valley, a chart that shows how the brain recognizes something as human. Usually when something doesn't act or look like a human, people get this feeling of uneasiness, that something isn't right. They start to fear the subject because they don't know how much of a threat it is. In movies you can achieve this effect of uneasiness with a performance and facial expressions, but in the end you're not going to achieve much with it because humans act like humans. A place where it is doable is through the medium of animation. Animation, whether it be stylized or realistic, will never achieve the peak of the uncanny valley into complete acceptance, but realistic animation has evolved to the point that it has been accepted by our brains as human. On the other hand, stylized animation like cartoons and anime never reaches in the uncanny valley because it doesn't try to look human, so our brain accepts them as human as well. The exception to animation reaching the uncanny valley is probably early 3D animation and later photorealistic animation that hasn't evolved into what we know today. But there exists a film that does it with 2D animation, and that film is Perfect Blue. In Perfect Blue, the director Satoshi Kon wanted to show the ugly side of fame and celebrities. The characters in the film reflect that, being drawn with detailed, distorted faces paired with the smooth animation. It creates a feeling of fear since human-like figures act like human, but also not in the same way. Why all this talk? What was the video about anyway? Yes, I wanted to talk about the uncanny valley because it's a really interesting topic and it ties with the main topic of the video. So what is that topic? I've gone for how many minutes without really explaining the main topic, so let's get to that. The topic of this video. In this video I want to talk about a couple of anime that caused this feeling of dread and fear to me. Not all of them are horror themed and not all have horror material in them, but the way they are animated and the structure of the dialogue confuse the viewer and cause fear inside of them. I find this topic very interesting because this feeling of fear when watching something that was not horror was new to me. I'm in no way going to spoil a large part of the story of these shows, but for those who want warnings, the shows on the screen are the ones being discussed in this video. So with that out of the way, we are going to discuss how the shows use dialogue to confuse and scare the viewer. We start with So doing this, I thought to move from the least to the most scariest, and while Monogatari has moments that scare the viewer, they aren't as intense as the other two. To start, let's start by saying that Monogatari is a really difficult show to understand, and when you think you do, the underlying themes change your perspective. So when I try to understand it and decode it, I will do a terrible job, but I also don't want to completely steal the reading of the show from another person, so let's try. The series is known for its interesting and weird dialogue. Sometimes episodes only consist of people talking, and the animators change the scenery to create the feeling that we are stuck at this void of dialogue. Since dialogue is so important in the series as a stylistic choice, we don't see any background characters, creating this feeling of being in a void. In combination with the out there dialogue, it creates a feeling of something not being right. In Monogatari, not characters truly themselves, they hide behind masks that they wear for other people, so we don't know where the persona ends and the truth begins. So when characters in the middle of sentences change the mannerisms, it startles the viewer and creates tension as they don't understand the threat that the character poses. But sometimes characters change mannerisms many times during conversation, making the viewer anxious since they don't know if the character is being genuine or not. We can see this in the first season when Araragi, the main protagonist, is alone in a park with Maui, I don't know how to pronounce that, a girl who got lost. The conversation goes smoothly and weird, standard for Monogatari, but we get glimpses into another persona. This puts the viewer on edge because in the world of Monogatari, spirits and violent entities are common, and what secrets this girl hides behind this facade is something unknown. Next up I want to talk about the Nadeko arc. So in this arc, a character called Nadeko, which was portrayed as an innocent little girl who is crazy about Araragi, suddenly meeting a snake, which was one of the demons that haunt the world from another act. She starts to act different. We see the snake making conversations with her, changing her behavior. We see her in a different light, but even though we are told she hasn't changed, the suspicious behavior escalates. The setup of this arc is genius because we are actively questioning the narration of one of the characters, which up until this point was good and a protagonist. Questions like, what is the snake? Is he really a god? What are his motives? And this whole thing makes the viewer scared of the narration of one of its protagonists. This feeling of unrest is emphasized with the direction cinematography, as stated earlier, creating a void, and a human cannot understand a void. He fears it. Mononoke, and I'm not talking about Princess Mononoke, I'm talking about the 2007 anime, which plot revolves around the medicine seller, which travels to Japan to slay demons, or as they called, Mononoke. The show, while having scary themes, its imagery isn't that scary. There are no jump scares, and monsters are not the main focus of the horror I want to talk about. While the show benefits to the somewhat trippy and disturbing imagery to creating an atmosphere, the main horror happens in the dialogue. In every episode, the Mononoke is hidden in a group of people, and it's the protagonist's job to find it and eliminate it. So the atmosphere is one of mystery, when at any moment any character could end up being the threat, and the level of that threat sometimes is unknown, making the viewer anxious. That anxiety comes from the unknown and the betrayal of trust between the cast of every episode. The emotional roller coaster it takes the viewer is on a bigger scale in intensity of Monogatari. While in Monogatari we are reminded of the dual nature of the character, it is on display, short moments making the viewer question, but not outright fear the motivation and words of the character. Another point to the scare factor of Mononoke is the show's great direction, framing scenes with color and background to create a feeling of being on LSD, emphasizing the horror in the dialogue and the distrust between the characters. Unlike Monogatari or Mononoke, serial experiments can be categorized as a horror, as a lot of the imagery is scary. Lain is an interesting show, even though it was made in 1998. It predicted a lot about the modern internet and how we came to understand it. If you watch Lain, you are most likely going to leave confused at it, because it is a story that isn't told through a conventional narrative. It is rather told through an avant-garde presentation and narration. Characters seem to do actions with no motivation, and the viewer might miss a big chunk of the plot if they don't catch up in the little details of the show. Leave them confused and scared because they cannot comprehend Lane's imagery and themes. So in that confusion, the dialogue serves as a purpose to make the viewer question reality. Like with Nadeko, we are told lies with the narration, and the line of where fiction ends and reality starts gets blurrier every episode, leaving the dialogue as the bridge. How to scare people with words. How do you do that is make them question their safety and make them uneasy to trigger their fight or flight response. Make them question reality and the world you have created.